Don't you flick that remote. Don't you change anything, because if you do, you're going to miss a really, 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 really good show with Perry Bacon. He's our featured guest. He's an MSNBC correspondent. Don't you want to know how the fall elections, the federal elections, the midterm elections are going to turn out? Don't you want to know if the U.S. Senate's going to go Republican? Don't you want to know if the U.S. House can be kept by the Republican? Don't you want to know, so much more about the Obama presidency, about who's running in 2016 from Perry Bacon at the MSNBC correspondent? Don't you click that remote, because if you do, you're going to miss Perry and a really, 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 really good show. You're watching Public Affairs. Berkowitz is my name, and politics is our game. And we're going to be doing so much politics and public policy, as I just promised, or as you just saw in the tease. We're taping this intro on March 31, the year 2014. It's part of that last picture show that you've been seeing from week to week. March 31, a day that will live in infamy. That's the day Comcast closed its Skokie studio. Did they close down Jeff Berkowitz? Well, as you can see, apparently not, because I'm still here. Are we going to be coming to you eventually from Chicago, from Evanston, from Mount Prospect, from TTW? Well, that would be a shocker, right? Somebody slightly right of center working at TTW, or at 257. Who knows where we'll be coming from? But for tonight, we're coming to you from Chicago, from the Institute of Politics in Hyde Park at the University of Chicago. Our featured guest is Perry Bacon. Everybody knows, if you follow politics, Perry's a key guy on MSNBC. He's often seen there commenting on politics. And you're going to find out like nobody else has. But if you go to the Institute of Politics, it's a great institution. We've talked about it before. It's David Axelrod's institution. They bring in great speakers. They have interns there. They have programs for the students, often like at noon, at 4:30, so the students don't have to miss classes. And everybody can go, adults, okay? You can go there. Institute of Politics. That's where we caught Perry Bacon. He was there to speak at a program. Before he spoke, we got some special insights into the midterm elections coming up in November. As I said, you have to know every state. You have to know the Republican who's running, the Senate, the Democrat who's running, if it's been chosen so far, or if not, who they're picking between. If you're going to make that kind of prediction, are there 11, 12, 14, there might be 14 contested seats. The Democrats may have those, and the Republicans have a chance. There are so many more seats that are at risk for the Democrats. So say there are 14, say there are 12. All the Republicans have to win to switch the majority is 5, okay? So can they do that? Can they pick up, or 6, can they pick up 5 or 6 seats to get a majority? Can they get a substantial majority? Can they win like 10 or 11 of those seats? So that's what you're going to find out this evening if you stay with us and watch Perry Bacon. But more than that, you're going to find out what are the key issues in the 2014 election. What are people going to be voting on when they decide to vote Democratic or Republican for the U.S. Senator? Also, will the U.S. House be at issue? Could the Republicans somehow win the Senate but then lose the House to the Democrats? Could that happen? You're going to find that out. Maybe even take a peek at the 2016 election. Who might be the nominees for the Republican and the Democratic Party? All right, so stay tuned. Don't move. As we said, it's going to be a great show. You're going to really enjoy getting to know and meet Perry Bacon, MSNBC correspondent. And just remember, come back next week and every week to Public Affairs. So we're standing here on March 12th. Here is the Institute of Politics at the University of Chicago, and we're speaking with Perry Bacon, who everybody would know. He's a regular on-air correspondent at MSNBC. His background was at Time and Washington Post. He knows his way around the White House. He knows his way around congressional issues. We're going to be focusing on the 2014 midterms, on the presidential election. And so let me just start with that. Let's start sort of out of order. Let's go right to the presidential race, okay. 2016, Perry. Who's the nominee? Is it obvious it's Hillary Clinton for the Democrats?
It seems obvious if Hillary Clinton runs that she's the nominee. If you look at the numbers, I mean, there was a Washington Post poll, she was at 70%. The conventional wisdom is she was the front runner in 07 and 08 and she lost. And she might lose again. Things are totally different. We've never seen this kind of non-incumbent be so far ahead. Like the gap between Hillary Clinton and Joe Biden is much, much larger than the gap between Hillary Clinton and
Something
Barack
has to
Obama
happen.
was.
If she runs into a health problem, if she has a major faux pas, if Benghazi explodes, something that you really couldn't predict now has to happen. Other than that, she's the nominee, right?
Yeah, I mean, maybe she doesn't want to be the nominee. I mean, there's a case she doesn't
Come on,
run.
you and I know she wants to be the nominee.
I assume
She's wanted to be the nominee ever since before she got married to Bill Clinton.
I assume that's true, and in
right.
that case, it's really hard to see anybody knocking her off.
All right. On the Republican side, it's a little trickier.
We have no idea who's doing all there. The convention, I mean, before a few months ago, I would have said Chris Christie appears to be the establishment candidate. And as we know, the Republicans tend to pick that person, Mitt Romney, John McCain, going back. Now, with what we call Bridgegate, I'm not as sure. I've heard a lot of the donor class in Washington and in New York, which was very pro-Christie for a while. Very nervous about him. The sort of dark horse name a lot of people are talking about right now is Scott Walker of Wisconsin. If he won re-election, he'd be another guy who won twice in a blue state. That's the kind of dark horse. There's a lot of talk right now. I was at CPAC over last week, so Rand Paul and Ted Cruz are the CPAC favorites, but it's still hard to see them becoming the Republican nominee, even because they're more of the insurgent crowd that'll finish in second. It's hard to see them finishing in first, though.
So is Walker not the dark horse? Is he, if Christie's knocked off by Bridgegate, isn't Scott Walker the favorite to take the nomination?
It's hard to say someone's the favorite who, if you look at his name ID, is very low among Republicans right now. So I don't want to. I say he's the dark horse because most Republicans don't know who he is, compared to Ted Cruz has very high name recognition among Republicans. So I would say right now, we in the political class in Washington are talking a lot about Scott Walker. I'm not sure he's that broadly known right now, but I think someone like him has the profile of what the Republican nominee would look like.
Jeb Bush?
If Jeb Bush wants to run, I think he'd have a great shot. We don't know exactly how much of a problem is it that his last name is Bush. His dad, his father, his brother was pretty unpopular by the end of that administration. That's the challenge for him. I do think that's something to keep a look at. He like Scott Walker fits the profile. He's won a blue state before. He's pretty establishment-y. He's not a Tea Party person. That's the profile. Jeb, I think, would be great if Hillary Clinton ran, because then everyone could say it's the nepotism on all sides ticket.
Bush Clinton.
You know, you can be if you're Bush, you can be a fresh place at that point.
But maybe the negative is maybe people have had too much of Clinton. That could knock her off. More likely, people have had too much of Bush. Is that right? It's more likely that Bush name is going to be a problem for Jeb than it is for Hillary Clinton, would you say?
I think let me take those separately. The Clinton name, I think the biggest problem for Hillary Clinton is not Bill Clinton, it's Barack Obama. It's really hard to win the third term for your party 3 times in a row. It's very rare since World War II that we've seen that happen. So the biggest challenge for Hillary Clinton is not inheriting the legacy of Bill, but inheriting, the Republicans will rightly claim in some ways she would be the third term of Barack Obama.
And right now, Mr. Obama, President Obama, is not the most popular guy in the country.
41% approval rating, that is a drag on your party no matter who you are if they're running. So that would be the challenge.
So the only other name you haven't mentioned, Marco Rubio from Florida, senator.
I didn't mention him for a reason. That he is really the buzz is off him right now. I was at CPAC last week, and I don't want to take too much into this, but CPAC straw poll 2013. This is a big conservative activist group. Last year, second place, 23%. This year, 7th place. So that means he's lost among the activists, and that's
so the typical stuff they say. What happens when you get in the U.S. Senate? You start cutting deals. You do things on immigration. You start trying to legislate. Becomes a problem. Is that why Marco's down?
That's exactly it. He took, I would just say one issue. His view on immigration is very similar to Barack Obama's, and that is not useful. The Republican Party right after
the Republican
Party, like right after the 2012 election, there was always talk. The Republican Party was ready to move left on immigration, and that at some point in 2013 stopped. And people aren't there anymore, and that's a problem for him.
All right, so it's Scott Walker versus Hillary Clinton. We can settle that.
We can settle that, exactly.
The 2014 midterms. Just tell me, right now, for people who don't look at this closely, the U.S. Senate is basically 55 Democrats and 45 Republicans. If the Republicans run the table, okay, everything goes right. They pick up 11 seats, 56-44. The Republicans are ahead. If they do that, they have the majority. The Of course, Obama can veto things. Of course, he's still making appointments, but no longer does a majority get his judicial appointments done. And they can lose senators. They can lose some who may be not so strongly Republican and still run things. I'm sure you're going to say they keep the House. Is that maybe they don't get 56-45, but just give me the odds that the Republicans get the majority, 52, 53, something like that, a good, strong majority in the U.S. Senate. What are the odds as of March 12th, 2014?
I think the odds are they get 51 senators. That's kind of where I
51. So what are the odds of getting 51?
I think that's probably
So
it.
more likely than not, is it 60% chance, 70%?
I think I would say it's about even. If you asked me to bet on
All right.
who's going to win control of the Senate,
They're the
I'd say it's
favorite.
about.
They're the favorite to get a majority.
No, that's what I'm saying is I would say
not
it's
even.
about even between the Democrats and the Republicans in terms of who will control the Senate. I think it's pretty close. If you look race by race, I
But
think
you're
it's pretty
telling
close.
me definitely the Republicans pick up seats.
Yes.
Do they pick up 4, in which case they're still in the minority, or do they pick up 6, in which case
If they
they're in
pick
the
up
majority?
5, they're still in the minority even. So because if you're 50-50, Joe Biden is the 51st
Let's
senator.
go for the easiest one. Say you're talking about the Republicans. Where are they most likely to pick up Senate seats?
Pretty obvious they're going to win in Montana.
Who's the current senator there now?
The current senator there is retiring, Max Baucus. So the
Okay.
current senator right now is the lieutenant governor, became a senator. He's a Democrat. John Walsh is his name, but he's an underdog. He's likely not to win. Shelley, the West Virginia senator, is also a Democrat right now. Jay Rockefeller, also retiring. So there's a second senator who's likely. That's also a red state as
So
well.
are the Republicans in those 2 states? Do you know those
The
folks?
Republican in Shelley Moore Capito is a Republican in West Virginia,
Okay.
and Steve Dacey, I believe, is the senator in Montana. Is the Republican in Montana?
Those
is
are the
running.
2 strongest states for the Republicans.
And
to
I'd
get a
say
pickup.
South Dakota is also strong, where the governor, Mike Rounds, is running for Senate now. Tim Johnson, the Democrat incumbent, is retiring, so he's also likely to.
So that's 3.
That's 3 right there.
The next most likely?
Next, most likely, you're in the zone of states in the South that have incumbent senators. So North Carolina,
Kay Hagan's
Kay
there now.
Hagan, and there's
Is
not
she
a
in trouble?
candidate.
Why
She's
is
in
she
trouble.
Too closely aligned with Obamacare?
Well, she's in trouble because it's a red state.
Was she somehow lucked in, or she was swept in by?
She won in 08 when Obama won with this big push of young and minority voters, and
And if
he was more popular
if that's not back there, she could
Right.
be in trouble.
She's in trouble. I mean, because Obama. If we also note, Obama won in 08 in North Carolina. He lost in 2012 in North Carolina. He's becoming more popular every day in North Carolina, and so the dynamics there just may be the fundamentals there.
Is there a
May
strong
be.
Republican? Do you know the name of that person?
Tom Tillis is the there's a primary going on. Tom Tillis is the favorite to win that. He's the leader in the state legislature there. That's less candidate dependent, I think. That's going to be more about turnout. Like North Carolina is a state that is very much has liberal Democrats, liberal white Democrats, African Americans.
They had a
and
lot of
conservatives.
Democratic turnout in 08 because of the Obama push.
Right.
Less likely to happen in 14.
In general, midterms you have a smaller number of young voters and minority voters turnout, and that's a big problem for
Right.
Kay Hagan because that's a
Okay.
big part of her voting bloc.
But if they get that, that's 4 seats for the Republicans. What's the next state?
So Louisiana,
Arkansas
Arkansas,
would be next.
Alaska, and Louisiana, Arkansas, Alaska, and there's Louisiana, North Carolina, Arkansas.
Well, let's take those 3.
Yeah.
Louisiana, Arkansas, Alaska.
Yeah, those
The
3. North
strongest
Carolina.
of those 3 would be Arkansas. Is Pryor in trouble?
Pryor's in trouble. I was down
This
there.
guy
a few weeks ago.
Cotton, he's pretty good.
Cotton's a good candidate. He's a little Paul Ryan-like. He's like a young, pretty charismatic,
Military
pretty
background?
charging, military background, unlike Paul Ryan.
Right.
Pretty conservative. Arkansas is a state where Blanche
Right.
Lincoln also got blown out in 2010. So that's a.
So Arkansas is a good state for the Republicans.
Arkansas is
as
a
of
great
now.
state for the Republicans. Louisiana is a strong state for the Republicans. The candidate there is Bill Cassidy, is a House member, against Mary Landrieu.
Mary Landrieu's always thought to be in trouble, and she somehow always pulls it
wins.
off.
We'll see how it goes.
What do
I
you
mean,
say? What do you think this time?
It's going to be close. I don't find predictions to be very helpful, but I mean, it's going to be close. Like, if you think
Okay.
about those 4 races combined, basically the Democrats have to figure out a way to win 1 or 2 races in very unfavorable environments,
Right.
like Alaska, Louisiana, North Carolina, Arkansas, all states where the president has
So
very
Alaska,
bad
you
approval
mentioned
ratings,
Begich
yeah.
is the incumbent
Yes.
there. He's the
Primary
first
still
term.
happening, yeah.
The primary, you mean he's facing a primary
No.
challenge?
The Republican,
Republican
not
primary,
clear the
okay.
Republican candidate's going to be, and they don't really have a good clue
So
there.
how good a race is that for the Republicans at this point?
It's a good race, again, for the same reasons. You have 4 Democrats who voted for the health care law. That's this entire issue, is that 4 Democrats, Romney won those states. it's hard to know exactly until we know how those Republican candidates and their campaigns develop to know exactly which one will be the easiest for the Democrats to defend.
Okay.
But in general, that's the broad look at this.
Now, you haven't mentioned Michigan, but the Cook report seems to put Michigan as a toss-up. Do you agree with that?
I don't, only because
What's the situation? Who are the players there?
Gary Peters, House member, who's there is
Who's moving up?
who's
Basically,
moving
Levin
up,
is-
who wants to
Levin
move.
is
Levin's
retiring.
retiring, right? Exactly.
Okay.
My sense of that, you get into a situation where it's the fundamentals there, which I always think are important. The fundamentals there is that it's a Democratic state. Obama won by a significant margin there. I still would rank that if the Republicans are winning
But
in
they've
Michigan.
elected a Republican governor.
I agree,
Yeah.
which is a little different. Wisconsin has one too. I mean, I would say that if the Democrats are losing in Colorado and Michigan, that's going to be a long election night. I mean, that's where
Then
I
we're
would-
talking
yeah.
about going from 7 maybe to
Yeah,
5
then
or
we're
6,
talking about
7
a
or 8
real
seats or something. a big
wave
sweep.
then, right? That's why I would be hesitant to say that Michigan's a toss-up.
Colorado? Stu Udall? Is it Stu Udall or is it Mo Udall? I can't
Mark
remember
Udall.
which. Mark Udall.
Yeah.
There's so many Udalls.
So many
I can't
Udalls.
remember.
I haven't been there. You know, I've been to most of these states in this cycle. I haven't been there. House member Gardner is a good, pretty strong candidate there as well. But that's another state where, again, the Democrats are losing in Colorado and Michigan. It's a bit that suggests there are bigger problems.
So with all of those states, we started with the ones that are pretty strong for the Republicans. A few more that were strong, a little
yeah.
less, and then we hit the marginal.
Right.
It almost seems, but you're hesitant to say this, trying to be fair and balanced here, but it almost seems facing that, if you're a betting man, you have to say 70% chance the Republicans, as of today, pick up the U.S. Senate. You're not going to go that far.
I don't feel that way because I would also note there are two candidates who are Republican. There are two races the Republicans could lose.
Which
I
of
think
those?
are-
Yeah, well, that's a good
Let's
point.
talk about
We didn't
that.
cover.
Georgia and Kentucky.
Okay.
So in Kentucky, you have Mitch McConnell, who is uniquely defined. And I'm from Kentucky, so
Are
I've
you
spent a lot of time
surprised
in this state.
everybody? They thought he would have a tough primary. It looks like an easy primary, right?
It was like an easy primary. He still got this problem of his approval ratings are near Barack Obama levels in Kentucky,
Really?
and that is really hard to get
Partly
down to.
reflecting because he's the minority leader in the Senate, has to take some bad votes relative to Kentucky, has to take some bad positions. Is that the issue?
It's not even the issue. He's become a symbol of
The establishment.
the establishment. He's been in Washington a long time. People there, even Republicans, are kind of wary of him.
Right, so he
and don't
doesn't
like
he
him.
doesn't energize
He doesn't
the team-
energize
the
people.
Republican Party,
Right.
and you're saying some Democrats or independents are not that happy with
Yes.
him. So you're saying that
And also, the other advantage is the candidate running against him, Allison Grimes, who's the Secretary of State there, she's not from Washington. She did not vote for Obamacare. She can say she doesn't like parts of it and actually have some credibility on
that
that
what she's
issue.
saying?
And that's what she's saying. And I think that is a useful thing to consider.
all right, so that's one
And
possibility
then
that
again,
offsets it.
in Georgia, Michelle Nunn, who's also the candidate there, also not
the
from
daughter of-
Washington.
which
She's
relative
the
of
daughter
Sam-
of
of
she's
Sam
the daughter of Sam Nunn, who's a senator there.
Big
So-
name for
big
a long,
name,
long time.
Exactly. And she also has the advantage of not being in Washington. One of the things is all the polling shows any incumbent this year, Democrat, Republican.
Chambliss is the incumbent. I mean,
Chambliss is the incumbent.
how-
He's
why is he in
retiring.
oh, okay.
So he's retiring.
it's an open seat.
So it's an open seat, and the Republicans there have you have the potential for what I would call the Todd Aiken problem, which is that you have a bunch of House members who are running for that seat who are all competing to see who can be the most conservative
Okay.
and say the most inflammatory things at times.
Which may be difficult
Which
come
m-
time of the general election.
election,
Georgia's not what it used to be. It's not as strongly
Right.
conservative. It's not as strongly Republican as it used to be, but it is a Republican state.
It's a Republican state, but Georgia has having a little bit of the North Carolina effect. What happened in Virginia is happening a little bit in North Carolina, which is happening in Georgia, which is there are more blacks, Hispanics, and kind of white urbanites
But again,
who are
can you
making
turn
it.
those folks out
Can you
when
turn
it's
those
not a
folks out?
presidential election?
It's a great question.
In an off year.
Yeah,
right?
it's a great question. I think it would help.
How do you do so? Let's take that more generally. Now, looking now, we've sort of got, I think we've done a fairly thorough job of diagnosing this in a race, but looking at it as a broad, as a whole, who is it who figures out how to get the turnout? Is it Obama, even though he stays in the background? You know, we're here at the Institute of Politics, where the director is David
Excellent,
Axelrod.
sure.
And so when David was there, we would say David would figure it out. Is David going to be called away from MSNBC, away from the Institute of Politics, back into action to save the Democratic Party in 2016?
Actually, one of David's proteges is a guy named David Seamus, who's now the political director at the White House, and he's
Okay.
involved in a lot of this kind of.
So what
how
is
do they
that
figure
person?
it
What do
out?
they do? What do you think they do to energize and get these folks who don't usually vote in the off year to vote in these midterms in 2014?
There's a lot of organizing around this. There's a lot of Democratic money and study being done. I mean,
Okay.
the person really talked about, I think this is Guy Cecil, who's the head of the Democratic
Well, is it issues?
Senate.
Is it issues, or what
I
do
don't
they
think
do?
it's about issues. I think it's really about ground game and really about
Turn out the vote.
turn out the vote
Get out
hours.
the
That's
vote.
what I think this is really about. I don't
And
think
let
it's about
people
issues.
know it's really important, the judicial appointments, which are starting to go through now,
Right.
because they're no longer allowing filibusters. All they needed is a majority. Those would come to a halt if they lose the majority, right? There could be basically no judicial appointments the last 2 years, right? If they lose the majority of the Senate.
No, that's exactly right. So I disagree with you a little bit in that I don't think judicial issues have ever moved a voter in America. I mean, very few.
Really? It's one of those
issues.
important things. It's amazing
I'm
that
not
people
disagreeing
can,
that it's important. I'm suggesting that it's not usually an issue that motivates voters a ton. and
So what do you
it's
do?
not-
What other than just get out the vote, you can't identify any issues that you need to do.
If we're talking about African American voters, I would say this is one of the last chances to, and I think you'll hear this, back up President Obama. This is in reality
Okay.
an election about backing
Win it for the
President-
Gipper, like win it for
Gipper.
Reagan,
It's the
win it,
Gipper, right.
win it for Barack Obama.
Right,
He
that's what I
did. He
think
did
you're
all
gonna
of this
see.
for. He did all of this for you folks.
Right.
Make sure you give it back.
Right.
On the House, is there any chance the Democrats can pick up the House?
No.
Okay. So most likely, what?
They lose seats,
Democrats lose seats. How many, roughly?
5 to 10.
Okay. So the majority becomes stronger in the House.
That's my-
hurts the Democrats a little bit more there, although it's not really the major thing. Everything is on the U.S. Senate come November 2014, right?
I would.
All eyes are on the U.S. Senate.
Well, I would actually add one other thing. All eyes should be on governors and state legislative races. as well.
Those are important
Those are
too
important.
for the longer run.
No, I would
Why
argue
are they?
for
Why are
the
they?
shorter
Why are
run.
they important?
Redistricting?
Redistricting?
No.
For one thing. No.
There's not much governing happening in Washington. There was.
So we're returning
done.
things to the states.
The states are doing real governing. If you're a Democrat and you're really interested in seeing Democratic governance happening, if you got Wendy Davis elected the governor of Texas and Charlie Crist elected the governor of Florida, that would make a whole lot more difference than electing a couple House members.
So you think Chris is going to get elected governor of Florida?
Crist is a favorite. Wendy Davis is decidedly not a favorite. But those are where the public policy issues are actually like we should know. I mean, in terms of like these elections are like worth watching, but as long as the House is controlled by Republicans and Barack Obama is in the White House, not a lot of big things are going to happen. We're headed toward 2 more years of gridlock, no matter who controls the Senate. And that's an important thing to keep in mind is that we're electing a Senate that's probably not going to do a lot in the next 2 years because you have these 2 opposing forces that are very opposed to each other.
So it's basically about Obama having a little bit more chance to pass some legislation, although that's difficult if the Republicans keep the House. But if he loses the Senate, it's almost impossible for him to do anything to add to his legacy in the last 2 years, right? So again, it comes back to win this for Barack.
Supreme Court nominees are very hard to get through if it's a Republican Senate. Any nominees becomes very hard to get through.
So let me ask you, now that we're back at Barack Obama. He's been there 5 years. It's an 8-year presidency. You know, I knew Barack when he was like a little guy, okay? From
Right.
2000 to 2004, we did 6 shows. He was a
Okay.
state senator. He was then a candidate for the U.S. Senate. And after he gave that speech in 2004 at the Democratic Convention and made him famous, we never saw him on our show again. But the point is, I used to say Barack Obama he transcended politics, okay?
Yeah.
And he transcended race.
Yeah.
Did he do that in his first 5 years of the presidency?
No. And we probably
What
shouldn't
happened?
have
What
expected
happened?
him to.
Why not? Do you think I had it right? I mean, you know a little bit about
No,
this.
of course.
Do you think he did transcend politics? He did transcend race before he became president?
No. I don't think he
It was
was
just part of the sort of
the
the
myth,
urban legend?
Well, the urban. I mean, he said he was going to transcend politics. He said he was going to unify us, but that was very temporary. That was for a little small bit of time that lasted from about January 2009 to about May 2009. This country has deep divisions on race and class and religion, and to think that one man could transcend those was probably a mistake on our part more than his.
So what's his legacy? Healthcare?
I think being the first black president is a legacy without saying you transcended race. I would say those things are different questions. I
So
think
he was an
like-
historic president
Yeah.
because he was the first African American president.
his legacy will be that the first sentence about him is of course he's the first non-white man to
Right,
be president.
okay.
The second legacy I think is going to end up being about Obamacare and also what he did to stop the recession. Those are the two things
But
that
with
are his
all this
legacy.
criticism of Obamacare, they can't sign people up. They can't sign up the right people. He keeps postponing the start. Almost nobody knows what actually is left with Obamacare. Why is that a legacy?
Well, it depends on what happens. I guess I would say that we are looking at several million Americans have health. I mean, this Congressional Budget Office estimates that if this law keeps going, we're in the first year, that by 2017, 24 million people will have health insurance who didn't have it before. If that happens, and that's an if, then that's certainly going to be a big legacy. I mean, if you
If
think
that
about
happens, because as of now, only 4 million people have signed up for Obamacare, right? Only 4 million. They said by now they would have 7 million by the end of March.
Right.
Looks like they'll be lucky to get to 5.
So if you get to, okay, so let's say you get to 5.
Okay.
So 5, and then every year.
How do you get to 24?
Well, every year it's just increase. Like
Do you think that'll happen?
Well, the CBO estimated 7. Let's say that the CBO estimated 7 and they got to 5.
Okay.
So let's say 25 becomes 20. That's 20 million people getting health insurance is a pretty big achievement.
So that's it. First African American president. Number 2, first president to bring about major reform in healthcare, insure 20, 30 million people who weren't insured, and that's it? Or did he do anything else?
Bin Laden, I'm sure we'll think about.
He got bin Laden.
Yeah, I'm sure we'll think about that.
What about this idea that the world no longer respects America? They no longer fear them, whether it was Syria, where he said there was a red line, and then they crossed it, and he said, okay, I'm not going to do anything. The Russians said, we know you're not going to do anything in Ukraine, so we're just going to take this little bit of the
I
country we
think there are
want.
3 issues.
I mean, am
that
I
fall-
overstating
I
it?
think-
Do you see that criticism?
No, I get that. There are 3 issues that I think we don't know yet. Okay. Looking back, will we think Barack Obama was president when something fundamentally happened in our power in the world? Second, will we look back and think this president didn't do enough about climate change? I think you're already hearing a little bit about this. If climate change becomes a bigger problem 10 years from now, will we think this was the administration that maybe missed it? Third issue, gay rights. There's been a huge shift in this country on gay rights, gay marriage. Did Obama lead that? I would say he didn't. Did he play some role in fostering it? I would say yes. And I think those are 3 issues that are not necessarily bills in Congress, but things that happen. The foreign policy part, I do think, have some great questions about what will his legacy be. He came in and said, I want to increase diplomacy. I want to make sure we fight fewer wars. But has that resulted in a weakening of American power? I don't think we know that yet.
All right. Perry Bacon, MSNBC correspondent, thanks so much for taking time to speak to us
Of course.
at the Institute of Politics, University of Chicago. Come on back and see us on Public Affairs.
Thank you.
Thanks.
All right.
This is Jeff Berkowitz signing off for Public Affairs on March 12th, 2014, from the Institute of Politics at the University of Chicago. Everybody should come out to see the Institute of Politics at the University of Chicago. Great programs, great speakers, great interns. Find out more about it by going to politics.uchicago.edu and find out more about, watch any of the shows for Public Affairs by going to youtube.com/publicaffairs TV.